Hey, you ever wonder whether some of the stuff that's in the common household products that you use every day might be harmful to your health? Well, some of them are, Stay tuned.
Welcome to Lean to the Left, home of no-holds-barred commentary, plus interviews with fascinating people. Some of them top experts, others simply with interesting stories to tell. You'll never know who'll show up at Lean to the Left, the podcast from notfakenews.biz. Now here's your host, Bob Gaddy.
Hey, thanks for joining us today on the Lean to the Left podcast. Today we're with Samuel Goodman, an author, speaker, and scientist who uses his education and experience to bring the confluence of science and engineering to important issues of public policy. But today we're going to talk about common household products and what harmful chemicals and additives consumers need to know about. We thought that would be a good topic to discuss as we're heading into the holidays and people are considering buying gifts for their families and friends and so on. Some of these things that we're buying every day can contain some fairly harmful additives, and Dr. Goodman knows about all of that. So I thought we'd check it out. He's got a PhD in chemical engineering, and he's just written a new book. It's called Beyond Carbon Neutral: How We Fix the Climate Crisis Now. Climate change, he says, is the defining challenge of our age. And at best, he says, it threatens to disrupt everything about our society, while at worst, it could destroy everything we've worked to build. Beyond Carbon Neutral lays out a complete strategy for reversing climate change by presenting 3 key areas of activity that are essential to averting catastrophe. Now, we had Dr. Goodman on our show a little while ago to talk about that. And so here we are again to take advantage of another area of his expertise. Welcome to our show, Dr. Goodman.
Thanks for having me back on.
Happy to do it. You were a star the last time.
Well, thank you so much. It was a great conversation, so I'm happy to be back talking to you again.
Good. So let's talk a little bit about this subject of harmful additives in household products. That's something I never would have thought about, but it just occurred to me. I'm about to go out to buy some pillows, and I bet you there's probably some things I need to look at to avoid. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, to just kind of set the stage here a little bit, a little bit of my background, and how it feeds into this. So we talked last time how I did a little work on my PhD on solar cells, and that kind of led into, some of the things I talk about in the book and climate change in general. But another big part of my research in grad school was essentially looking at the toxicology of certain nanomaterials. I also served as, my lab safety officer. So being aware of all these different kinds of chemicals around us, played into, how I tried to keep myself safe and how you could try to keep the people around me safe, potentially from themselves and from each other. So
see, I told you this guy was a freaking genius.
Well, I won't go that far, but so yeah, there's the chemistry is an amazing thing, a little bit can go a long way in certain instances, and while other things are just completely benign, and it's just fascinating to talk about it. And we're going to be diving into some different kinds of potential effects you can see throughout the show. But I'm not a medical doctor, so if you have questions, concerns about any kinds of conditions you may think you have, any kinds of symptoms, of course, get those checked out with a medical provider. I'm not here to provide any specific medical advice on any of these things.
Okay. Well, before we start with what you have, I want to know about my pillows. What do I need to watch out for?
So, well, pillows kind of tie into a couple different things here. For a lot of different things, different furnitures, different kinds of bedding materials, they might have different flame retardant chemicals in them. So these are things designed so if there's a house fire, you drop your cigarette in bed while you're up reading at night, it doesn't completely cause you to spontaneously combust in the middle of the night. The problem is, some of these things aren't necessarily the nicest. A lot of them can contain things like bromine, which is a toxic element in pretty much all forms and generally to be avoided. Now, we use a lot of these chemicals quite broadly and a whole lot of different products. And right now they're allowed, they're generally fine, but I wouldn't be surprised if in 10, 20 years it's one of those things we look back on as maybe we shouldn't have been doing that. We took asbestos out of the walls. Turns out that wasn't such a good thing. I think these flame retardant chemicals would kind of fall into the same category.
Really? But when I go to the store, if I want to avoid something that's harmful in my pillow, I should look for a pillow that does say that it's flame retardant. Is that right?
Yeah, generally that's personally what I would stick away from.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So let's talk about some of these other areas that people should be concerned about, think about.
Well, we're talking, about Christmas, and the holidays brings up a whole lot of memories, food, family, but of course you got the Christmas presents, the highlight of any kid's year, until they get to that one package, from your least favorite relative who gave you a big pack of socks or some other utilitarian clothing item,
right?
Instead of a fun little toy.
Yeah.
So clothing has gone through a lot of changes throughout my lifetime. You have stain resistant shirts, things that are iron free. I've certainly used those a lot when I was having to put on a button down shirt and going into work every day. It's certainly a lot better than slaving over a hot iron every day.
Sure.
But a lot of these clothing items that use synthetic fibers, so not cotton, not linen, man-made artificial fibers.
Right, like polyester, for example.
Exactly. Something like that. Something that's derived from, petroleum or some other man-made source. There's kind of an ecological issue with these that has, it's becoming more and more prevalent, is that every time you wash a garment that contains these synthetic fibers, some of them come off and they get into the water supply. Now, these are essentially microplastics, just tiny pieces of plastic that wind up throughout the ecosystem, and they tend to accumulate, where the water runs. So down in the oceans and in pretty much everywhere around the world, you can find these microplastics inside sediments, inside living organisms. And since they're so small, they work their way up the food chain and start to accumulate. So some little algae, gloms onto some, gets attached to some piece of microplastic. A larger fish eats that. The plastic gets stuck into it, and now it works itself up so that in a lot of people, you can find these really tiny pieces of plastic, in the body in various places. So it's kind of an interesting effect that we're having on the overall ecosystem. And it's not really clear what kind of effect they might be having on overall health, because they're small enough, they're not going to cause an intestinal blockage or something like that. But certain plastics, they can release what are called endocrine disruptors. So if you remember about 10, 15 years ago, there was this big thing about water bottles and bisphenol A, which was, a component that you use when you're making plastic. There are a whole lot of these other chemicals beyond just, the actual plastic itself, things to make it more easily processable, things to make it more malleable, change its properties. But over time, with heat, with water, some of these things can leach out and can have a demonstrable negative impact on your overall health. So whether or not microplastics can do that we're ingesting, whether or not that's causing, wider problems throughout the ecosystem, that could be a potential problem that we're looking at in the future, because, certainly there's no slowing down of our use of plastic materials.
Well, plastic is plastic. And we know that things like plastic bags that are just left by the wayside end up in the oceans and in the lakes and the rivers, and cause all kind of problems with the wildlife. And it just seems like that's a whole other issue, though. I mean, that's an environmental concern that is a topic for another time, but it certainly is a tough one. It seems like the more advances that we make using various chemicals, sometimes it just brings on additional problems that we may not have thought of.
Well, that's true. And that's part of the kind of the story of the industrial revolution and chemicals in general. We didn't always know what we were dealing with because they were completely new. So you have something that looks promising, but turns out with more time, more investigation, it turns out, maybe it's not worth the risk. So you have, you basically just have to keep your eyes open and be willing to, evaluate that as it comes in and be, on the lookout for these kinds of things, because, there's literally infinite number of chemicals that you can be exposed to on a daily basis. So some of them may not be worth, whatever benefit they give us, and we might have to look at alternatives.
Like what would that be?
Well, so let's stick with the clothing. So you have your nice, poly cotton blend. It's great for ironing, it's great for stain resistance, but maybe that convenience isn't worth it in the long term for the overall ecological or human health. Maybe it's better to go back to the completely natural fiber before. That's a little harder to work with, a little harder to keep clean, looking nice, but maybe that's a worthwhile trade-off.
What about with kids' toys?
Kids' toys. That's the one you always hear about in the news around Christmas time, because there's always some report about some manufacturer including some kind of heavy metal in some part of the process. That could be as base metal itself, as part of the structure of the toy, or as the paint or the coloring used in it. So the pigments that we've used throughout the years have been a great source of accidental poisonings. So way back in the day, back in the 1800s, to get a really nice green color, you needed to use arsenic. So you have all these, vintage houses that were wallpapered in basically poison wallpaper. And one of the theories is that it actually killed Napoleon because he was on a tropical island with this kind of wallpaper on it, but is a hot and humid climate, which causes some of that arsenic to come out in the air. So maybe he got some inadvertent poisoning that way.
Wow.
So our school buses, that bright yellow color, that used to be a lead chromate to get that nice bright yellow power, that nice bright yellow color. Now lead, of course, everyone knows that's dangerous, but the chromate part, well, that's the subject of the movie Aaron Brockovich. That was the water contaminant that was, the subject of that poisoning. So, great color, iconic color for the school buses, but, not something you really want to be dealing with.
Was it still used in school buses?
No, most of that has been completely removed from the market now. There's only a very few niche uses where you would even need that kind of chemical in a paint.
Well, that's a good thing.
Certainly nothing you or I would ever be exposed to.
Well, that's a good thing. Okay. All right. So what else do we need to be worried about?
Well, let's say, you get the latest gadget for Christmas, some toys. I'm kind of out of the loop, on toys right now, but back in the day, there's all kinds of these little remote control or other little things, but they all needed batteries.
Right.
And, you go to the hardware store, you pick up, a pack of AA batteries, and you don't think about it when they run out of juice, you toss them. And, for alkaline batteries, that's okay, but not for a lot of other kinds.
Okay.
So you of course have your lead acid batteries. These are what you use in your car.
Okay.
And I found one when I moved into my new house, just sitting between a couple wall studs. No idea what it was for.
What?
Yeah.
A battery sitting between wall studs in your house?
Yeah, it was, it weighed about 2 pounds and it was about 6 inches tall. And I don't know, it was just sitting there.
Maybe
thankfully
somebody was going to set up a bomb or something.
Oh, I hope not. It was probably part of some old security system or something like that.
Well, how old was the house? It was
built mid-80s.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's a few years old, 40 years old. Yeah.
So that warranted a special trip down to the household hazardous waste that my county runs, because that's basically what you have to do with those kind of batteries. You don't want to just throw those away. And we actually have a really good recycling system for car batteries and everything like that. Over 99% of them actually do get recycled. So that lead doesn't enter the environment.
So when a car battery gets recycled, in what way does it get recycled?
So basically, there's two things you have to do. You have to crack it open and you have to neutralize the acid, because the acid in the lead acid battery is sulfuric acid, because that's basically how the chemical reaction works to store and give you power, is the reaction of the sulfuric acid with the lead metal within the battery. So once you neutralize that, you just have to take the solid metal lead out of it and then basically reforge it into whatever you need, and of course dispose of the housing for it, and that's basically it.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's not turned into another battery, it's turned into something else.
I think in a lot of cases it is turned into another battery.
Oh yeah, really? Yeah. Okay.
Because then you don't have to mine any more lead to make new batteries too.
Well, that's a good thing. Now, when we come back from this break, Dr. Goodman will tell us about some other products that we should be concerned about.
Well, so everyone's kind of aware, car batteries are dangerous, generally. Ones you may not be so aware of are nickel cadmium or Nicad batteries.
Okay.
So these are rechargeable batteries. May not be as common now as they were before, but they contain cadmium, which is a toxic metal. One that I worked with a lot when I was in grad school, making cadmium-based nanoparticles. Now, kind of circling back to the lead. So lead, it causes neurological problems. It causes, decreased ability to learn, decreased cognitive performance. There's one hypothesis that the spike in crime during the 80s and 90s was due to the accumulated environmental lead from leaded gasoline, leaded paint, causing these symptoms on a population-wide scale. So it's good we're phasing that out, and that's the primary risk. If your kid has any lead paint in their toy, that's what you want to avoid. Now, cadmium is completely different metal, so it has a completely different set of health problems associated with it. And they originally discovered these in Japan because there was a mine there that was releasing cadmium waste. It's a byproduct of zinc production. Zinc, much more common metal. Cadmium is a contaminant in it that needs to be removed. And they were just kind of putting this in the waterway, but the people downstream, they started getting these pains, these bone pains. They called it itai disease, which basically means ouch, ouch, because it would just hurt to walk, hurt to touch things. And that's because cadmium replaces the calcium in your bones and causes all sorts of problems like that. So definitely something you want to keep out of the environment, which is why in a lot of places nickel cadmium batteries are recycled in much the same stream as your lead acid would be. They take it, they break it down, and they recover that metal so it doesn't leach into the environment.
Are there alternatives for consumers to purchase other than those?
Sure, you can always use alkaline batteries, which are one of the more common types, and those can go right in the trash.
Okay. But alkaline batteries are not rechargeable, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
you can put a non-rechargeable battery in a device that came with a chargeable battery. Is that correct?
Sure.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
As long as it's the same size and type. There are a couple devices that come with, very unique battery sizes that are not designed to be replaced. Right. So there was actually an issue with this. I think it was either last year or 2 years ago, where they were selling these kind of industrial batteries that you're not supposed to ever really replace or even have contact with as a consumer, but they were selling them loose, and it was causing a whole lot of danger with, potential malfunctions or other, accidents happening when people were replacing them. So, yeah, if you have access to the battery case and it says double A's, well, you can just put any kind of double A in there. It doesn't really matter.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. I didn't know that, so probably some other people didn't know that either.
Yeah.
So, Yeah. Okay.
There are a couple weird things, with smoke detectors. They may say they're only rated to accept a certain brand of battery. So
Right.
that's just something to, look at the manual first just to check to
Yeah.
make sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, in general, it's not going to be an issue with your
Okay.
Xbox controller.
Okay. Good.
As long as it's from a reputable source.
What does a non-rechargeable battery last as long as a rechargeable battery?
That'll depend on the actual capacity of the battery. So, depending on the chemistry,
Oh, okay.
they all have different capacities per volume. So they should
Okay.
advertise that on the packaging. So if you look and it says, X number of milliamp hours, that basically tells you how much power it can provide overall. So the higher the number, the higher the capacity.
That's good to know. I always just ignore that stuff.
Well, it's typically numbers you don't really have to worry about. I mean, you pop a battery in the remote control and it dies when it dies and you replace it.
That's pretty much it. Oh, okay. So what's next, my friend?
Well, there's the final type of battery. So if you want, the best kind and ones that are rechargeable, you have the lithium ion. Now,
Right. Okay.
you don't want to throw these away in the trash either because, well, if you look on YouTube for, exploding laptop batteries, that's because when a lithium gets in contact with air or water, it really likes to react vigorously.
Is that the ones that they don't let you take on an airplane?
Certain kinds they don't let you take on. The ones that have demonstrable design flaws that cause a lot of these problems. But it's the kind of battery that's in your phone. It's the kind of battery that's in your laptop because it has the highest potential capacity to it. But you don't really want those to kind of enter the general waste stream because you don't want to risk, those kind of fires.
Right.
So,
Right.
as always with these, unless it explicitly says, you can throw it away, it's best to check with the local ordinances and your local waste disposal folks to see, what the best way to handle these batteries is and where you should take them.
Well, you're giving us a battery of great information here.
I appreciate a good pun.
I don't know if that was a good one, but
that's the kind I would make, so it's perfect.
all right. So what's next on your hit list?
Well, here's something that, I recently did with my wife. We bought the new house and we went around and looked at all the light fixtures to be on the lookout for CFL light bulbs, these compact fluorescents. And we kind of didn't want any of these in the house, and they've been phased out over the last couple of years in favor of LED light bulbs. Not only because LED light bulbs are more efficient, but because CFLs contain mercury within them. So if you crack those on the floor, you drop them, well, now you have a little mercury spill, a little mercury vapor in the air. So that can create a little issue beyond just having some broken glass to deal with.
Oh, okay. Like what kind of issue?
Well, so mercury can cause all kinds of problems. Like lead, it can cause neurological issues. That's kind of the primary target for it. Actually, it can, of course, interfere with different kinds of things in your organs, potential kidney problems, things like that. So generally something you want to stay away from. But it's not just, mercury is a problem, but it also depends on what form it is and also what kind of chemistry is attached to it. So you can hold.
Generally, what you're saying is generally you don't want to have those CFL light bulbs in your house anymore.
Well, as long as it's unbroken, it's fine. So if you trust yourself not to break it, or if you trust yourself or the people around you to, maintain it, then it's a perfectly safe option. It's just when it breaks, then you start getting that problem. And we were changing some light fixtures around anyway, so we just decided to upgrade everything to LEDs just to get it done with. And these are things that, again, you might have to take to your local hazardous waste disposal site to, really treat properly.
Right. So LED lights, though, are safe. There's no demonstrable problem with them, right?
Oh yeah, it's just a plastic shell with a little light emitting diode inside. So no mercury, no real heavy metals in any quantity that I would be afraid of.
Right. Is that the type of light that's in those solar lights that you find in you put in your yard and stuff.
Well, they're kind of becoming ubiquitous. You can get them for pretty much any application now these days.
Oh, okay.
They're cheap enough. You go into, Home Depot or Lowe's and you just see a whole big wall of LED light bulbs.
Right, that's true. That's true. If you look for the old-fashioned kind of light bulbs, you can hardly find them.
Yeah, pretty much. I haven't seen them in years, actually.
Yeah. I like the old-fashioned kind of light bulbs, actually. All right. So what else do we have to? Man, I'm telling you what, light bulbs, batteries, clothes. What are we going to, toys? What are we going to buy people for Christmas if we can't do any of that?
Well, let's go to the kitchen. Let's spend a little time cooking Christmas dinner here.
Okay.
So there was a movie out about a year ago, starring Mark Ruffalo, called Dark Waters, and it was about these what they're called persistent fluorinated chemicals, and these are things that are used in producing Teflon. What you line your pots and pans with. It goes into stain repellent sprays that you might put on your furniture, and well, it was proven in court that these can cause various kinds of health problems for people. They linked it to about 5 or 6 different demonstrable problems for the people in this West Virginia town that were exposed to high concentrations of these chemicals. Now, they're also around in trace amounts, in consumer products like your Teflon coated pots and pans. And they found, even up in the Arctic, there are these class of chemicals because they don't really break down ever. So they're fluorinated chemicals, which means that it's carbon atoms connected to fluorine, and that is an incredibly strong bond. Like it takes a tremendous amount of energy and special conditions to even start to break those apart, and the capacity to do that doesn't really exist in nature.
Wow.
These are fully artificial chemicals that they'll be around for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, not really sure, and they're pretty much everywhere. And certainly at high concentrations, they cause people problems. The people working on the lines reported flu-like symptoms if they had to clean out certain pieces of equipment and got a big dose of it all at once. So it's another one of those things like microplastics. We're not really sure what the overall health effects are going to be in the long term now that basically everyone's been exposed to it.
Right. Whew. Okay, more good news for us?
Well, there are alternatives. So, of course, you can get nonstick pans that aren't reliant on fluorinated chemicals. So, there are options here.
How do you know that? Now, for example, we were in Costco the other day, and there was a nice set of nonstick pans. And we have great pans already, but we decided to pick them up. And we've been using them. How do I know that there's nothing bad in that?
Well, in general, so my wife and I, we upgraded our pots and pans as well, and we opted for ones that are ceramic based. So a nonstick ceramic pan wouldn't have Teflon in it.
Okay.
Or these type of chemicals.
So the thing to do is to look for, if you want a nonstick pan, is look for one that does not have Teflon, that is ceramic based, that would be safe and efficient.
Right.
Okay.
And, part of the uncertainty is we don't know if, the Teflon in the pots and pans even is dangerous,
right.
At that level. We just don't know. There's just a lot of uncertainties.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to weigh that option, because clearly we've been using these from the 50s, since the 50s.
Sure.
And has there really been a really demonstrable link to a lot of people using them? Maybe it's really subtle. Maybe we don't know, but that's just something to consider.
So what else?
So this touches on something that my wife and I had to do when we moved in. Of course, 6 months later, appliances started to die, because that's how it always goes. You move into a new place and everything breaks just in time. So we had to replace our microwave. Now microwaves, they are interesting because the piece that actually generates the microwaves inside of it incorporates a kind of an uncommon element that you don't see a lot of the time, beryllium. And in its form, it's like a ceramic. It's fine, it's in the microwave, but you always want to make sure they're disposed of properly, because breathing in any kind of beryllium dust or, particulates that contain that element, it causes a chronic condition called berylliosis, which never really goes away. It basically, once it gets in your body, it stays there and can cause, all these kinds of problems. It's a carcinogen. So, you definitely wanted to have your microwave broken down and handled in a OSHA approved facility for handling that kind of thing.
I've always wondered if it's harmful to heat up food in a plastic container in a microwave.
Yeah, that's a very good question, because those same kinds of endocrine disruptors that talked about with microplastics, those are in plastic food containers as well. And there have been reports that certain food items that you microwave in a bag, if you do that a lot, some of these things can leach out, and there has been correlated with higher incidence of cancer. So it's one of the reasons that my wife and I switched. Instead of using plastic lunch containers that we take to work, we switched to glass ones, because those don't have any of those potential chemicals in them.
Right. Okay. So that's a good option to do. Glass is heavier, of course.
Well, it gives you a better workout.
Well, I mean, you look like you're in pretty good shape, so it's probably why.
Yeah. Curling all my lunches.
That must be it.
On the subway with your lunch bag, just, getting a little workout in.
You ride the subway, do you?
Yeah, that's the best way to get into a DC from where I'm at.
You're because in Virginia. Didn't you tell me you live in Northern Virginia?
Yep, Northern Virginia. So trying to drive in on 66 is just a nightmare.
Yeah, so you take the metro in.
Yeah.
Ugh,
okay. Yeah, especially when the tolls hit like $20.
Did they really?
I mean, it depends on the traffic. If the traffic is super high, the tolls can, really get up there.
Oh my God.
And it's all automated.
Yeah. So that's right. They put in that new system. I don't know how long ago it was, but it's all based on time and volume, how much you pay. Same with like on the beltway, on the sections of the beltway that are where they have tolls for the high speed lanes.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you just drive through, a camera takes a picture of your license plate, and you get you also have a little like radar detector type dealie you put on the windshield, so it senses that, and you get a bill, charged to your account. Yeah,
and so what nasty chemicals are in that radar detector device that's on your windshield?
Oh, I mean, probably nothing. It's just it's just a circuit board.
So you can't sue the state for whatever. Okay. All right. Is there anything else we need to be worried about when it comes to shopping?
Well, let's say this is another thing we did. You're in the market for a new refrigerator.
Okay.
And the way a refrigerator works is that it compresses, then expands a gas to absorb and then release heat from the inside of the box to keep things cold.
Okay.
So let's say you're cleaning out your grandparents' house. They got an old fridge in the garage,
right?
Something that's ancient. You don't really want to just throw that in the dump, because some of these old refrigerants weren't the best. So the hole in the ozone layer, that was the big issue. So that was caused by chlorofluorocarbons,
right?
And a lot of old refrigerators use that as their coolant medium. So if you throw it in the junkyard, that cracks and releases the atmosphere. You don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
You also don't want to do that for a new fridge, because it might have hydrofluorocarbons, which don't put a hole in the ozone layer, but they're up to 11 or 12,000 times worse for global warming than carbon dioxide. So you don't want to release those either. So just another thing we have in the house that you want to be careful how you dispose of it.
And those CFCs, they're regulated by the federal government, aren't they?
Yeah, they've pretty much been phased out for commercial use.
Okay.
Due to the ozone issue. So one of our triumphs for actually solving an environmental problem, because the ozone hole is closing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, that's been really helpful, Dr. Goodman. I appreciate your insight into all of this. Have we missed anything?
Well, I mean, we could continue on for several hours, but I don't want to scare people too much because, of course, if you're using these things, in their normal, approved way, they don't pose a hazard to you. It mostly comes down to how you throw them away, how you handle them on a day-to-day basis. As long as you're doing that safely and,
and looking for the better options too on some of these things. For example, the pans that we just discussed a minute ago.
Right. It's just something to be aware of as, you look to make your purchasing decisions.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, that's great. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Dr. Goodman, for joining us today on the Lean to the Left podcast. We appreciate it very much. And I hope our listeners found some value into this discussion.
Well, thank you again for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Now we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back after this short message. Hey guys, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. You'll come back on a regular basis. We provide narrations of commentary published almost daily on notfakenews.biz. But every Monday and sometimes on Thursdays, we're streaming newsmaker interviews like this one. And we're going beyond the world of politics for many of them, presenting guests and topics that I hope you find interesting and enlightening. Guests like Dr. Goodman, for example. Check out notfakenews.biz too, where you'll find new material just about every day by some excellent writers with perspectives on a whole range of topics. You can sign up as a member at notfakenews.biz, and of course, it's all free. Also, let your friends know about the Lean to the Left podcast and take a minute to subscribe yourself. Just go to podcast.notfakenews.biz to subscribe, check out the upcoming interview schedule, and listen to all of our episodes. You can also support this podcast by clicking on the Donate tab at the top of the page. Remember, our goal is to be informative and entertaining as we comment on the latest developments in the news. You guessed it, with just a little lean to the left. Now this is Bob Gaddy signing off for Lean to the Left at notfakenews.biz.